Welcome to the church family that is lifting lives through living love, inspiring hope, filling with faith, and transforming our world. These recorded messages are made available so that you might have additional opportunities to stay connected with us and that you might learn and grow in your faith. God bless you as you hear the word today. And now, the message.
Scripture reading for today is Genesis chapter 28, 10 through 22. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, with the top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave until I have done what I have promised you. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I can return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And all that you give me, I will give you a tenth.
This is the third week in our series, Signs of Grace. And we're using this as a metaphor to talk about the sacraments, baptism and communion in particular, and how they are signs. They point us towards something. They're not just water, bread, juice, but they point us towards a deeper mystery, the ongoing presence, the ongoing work of grace in all of our lives. And today was the day we're wrapping it up by talking about confirmation. And confirmation isn't a sacrament per se, but it does point us towards the sacraments, or really it's rooted in the sacrament of baptism, that when we get to confirmation, our youth claim for themselves the identity that their parents claim for them at the moment of baptism. And so I want us to consider one last sign, a road sign in particular, I think applies to the idea of confirmation. And this sign comes in handy if you've ever been on a long road trip, especially if you've had little kids in the back seat. And you know, if you're on a long trip with kids, there's a question that you're going to be asked again and again and again. And what is it? How are we there yet? How long until we get there? And you know, if you have small kids, there's no good answer to this question, right? Like, you can tell them 1 hour or 2 hours, but they have no concept of time or distance. And so we just got to the point as parents, we were better off, we would just say, pop in the movie, and when the movie's over, we'll be there, right? But if you do want to know where to go, you know, how far you have to go, there's a sign that helps us answer this question. We call them mile markers. Mile markers appear at regular intervals along the road. They let us know. Mile markers kind of help us answer basic questions. Where are we, and how far do we have to go? The civilization that kind of invented or systematized mile markers is the Romans. As the Romans built their network of roads across all of Europe, they set up markers at regular intervals every mile to measure the distance from the city of Rome, so that anyone traveling along a Roman road knew where they were and how far it was until they could get to either Rome or whatever city they were going to next. But the Romans didn't have steel signs like we do today. Instead, they set up big stone obelisks like you see on your screen. Hence, we have the term in our language, milestones. Now, when we talk about milestones, we're very rarely talking about geographical location. More often, we talk about milestones as symbols of our progress through life. So when we talk about children again, we talk about milestones, whether it's sitting up on their own or crawling or walking or talking. As parents, we track the milestones of when they can, sleep through the night, to get rid of their passy and go to the toilet and go to the bathroom on their own. Like, these are great milestones we celebrate. And of course, the milestones continue all the way through, whether it's confirmation, graduation, all the points in between. We even talk about milestones in our adult lives as well. Like, in our careers or in our businesses, there are goals towards which we're shooting, that we're trying to kind of cross those thresholds. And this second meaning of the word milestones, the idea of kind of marking moments that are important, not geographically, but in life's journey, well, that's not particular to the Romans. That kind of dates back to ancient civilizations as well. The Israelites in particular used this practice throughout Scripture. Whenever there was an important moment, and in the story of an individual person, or sometimes in the story of the nation, what would they do is they would set up a stone or an altar, and they would consecrate that moment. They would mark it in their memory and in their story so that they could repeat it again and again and again. And today's story is one of the first examples of these kinds of practices. The stone on which Jacob slept that night, at the time, he didn't think it was anything special. It was just an ordinary stone underneath an ordinary sky in an ordinary place. I mean, the place where he stopped that night, it was just a stop on his journey, and it was not a place that Jacob ever thought that he would want to mark. This wasn't a journey that he ever wanted to remember, because he wasn't really journeying towards something. He was running away from something, or really running away from someone. If you don't know Jacob's backstory, the quick version is this, that Jacob was the second of twins. He had an older brother, Esau, that was born just seconds before him. In fact, the story goes that as Esau was being born, coming out of the womb, Jacob was holding on to his heel as if he was trying to pull him back in. And so his parents gave him the name Jacob, which is kind of from the Hebrew, akeb, meaning grasping the heel. But Akeb has Jacob has a double meaning, Akeb, grasping the heel, but also Akab, which could mean deceiver. And that play on words tells us something about who Jacob was. That he was always grasping after those and after his brother. He was deceiving to try to get what he wanted. And what did Jacob want more than anything else? Well, he wanted his brother's birthright, first off, because his older brother had the birthright, the inheritance coming to him. But not just that, but he wanted his father's blessing, his attention, his approval, his affection. Because you see, Isaac chose favorites, and Jacob was not the favorite. His older brother Esau was. Esau was big and strong and burly and hairy, an expert hunter. He was everything Isaac had ever wanted in a son, and Jacob was none of those things. He was of slight build. He was completely hairless. He was not an expert hunter. That was not where he felt comfortable. Instead, the Bible says that he was more comfortable among the tents. He was comfortable with with the women. He was a man of books and learning. He didn't enjoy being out in the wild. And because Isaac chose Esau to be his favorite, Jacob found refuge with his mother Rebekah. He became her favorite instead. And so the moment finally came when Isaac was old and his eyesight had faded. He was blind at this point. He knew the end was coming, and he wanted to have one final meal and then give his blessing to his son Esau. And so he told Esau, "Go out into the fields, kill some wild game, and prepare for me my favorite stew. And after you've brought me back this final meal, I will give you my final blessing." And so Esau goes off into the fields, but Rebekah, the mother, was standing nearby, overheard this request, and she knew this was a moment where she could take advantage of it to bless her favorite son, Jacob. And so she took Jacob and she covered him in fur so he would feel like his brother to their dad. And she went and she had some meat, I guess, and she prepared Isaac's favorite stew and gave it to Jacob and instructed him on what he was to do and what he was to say. All Jacob had to do was go in there, pretend to be his brother, and receive his blessing. And to me, this is one of the most poignant moments of the Old Testament, this picture of Jacob receiving Isaac's blessing. Because here Isaac is blessing this son, except it's the wrong son. And Jacob is so desperate for his father's attention and approval and blessing that even though he knows the words are not meant for him, he's still thirsty, just drinks them in as if they're meant for him. But the moment is so short-lived. No sooner does Jacob receive his father's blessing and exit the tent than Esau enters, and the ruse is up. Because Esau says, no, I didn't bring you the stew, that was my brother. You gave your blessing to the wrong person. And he says, well, that's okay, do it again. But Isaac says, I can't. In that culture, in that time, you don't get to take back your words. So the blessing had already been spoken. Isaac can't revoke it. The only thing Isaac can do is give Esau his own blessing, which he does. And so his father Isaac answers him and says, your dwelling will be away from the earth's riches, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck. So you might imagine Esau was not happy with this blessing. He decided right then and there, I'm ready now to throw the yoke off my neck. And he made a vow that he was going to kill his brother. So Rebekah knows that Jacob is in trouble. I mean, there's no way that he can go hand-to-hand combat with his bigger, stronger brother who's much better when it comes to weaponry and fighting. The only thing she can do is say, Jacob, you got to run. Go to my brother, Laban, who lives up in Haran, and there you will find refuge. Now look at that map, and you can see how far away Haran is from Beersheba. It's not right around the corner. But Jacob has no other choice. He runs for his life. And there he is in Beersheba, his first night away from home, completely on his own, and he goes to sleep. Nothing but a rock for his pillow. Now, what does this rock tell us? It tells us first and foremost that Jacob is not traveling in comfort. He's not traveling with anyone else. He is completely by himself. I mean, despite his father's wealth, despite receiving the father's inheritance, at this point, Jacob has nothing. He's finally taken hold of the thing that he spent his whole life seeking and desiring. And as soon as he took hold of it, it turned to ashes in his mouth. He's there sleeping in the desert, for all intents, a motherless child. And I imagine there were two questions that were burning in his heart. The first was, what's going to happen to me? What's going to become of me? But the second question I think is even deeper, is does anyone care? So he goes to bed that night, his head on a rock, and he has a dream. And in the dream, he sees a ladder, a ramp, a staircase, kind of like the ones you picture like built into the side of old temples. But this ramp, the staircase, it goes all the way up to heaven. And the angels, God's messengers, are going up and down the ramp, ascending and descending. But it's not the vision that strikes Jacob. It's the words that God speaks, because he hears a voice, and the voice says, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. And I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. The same promises that were given to Abraham and then to Isaac, now Jacob is receiving. But then there's this: I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. You see, God answers those two fundamental questions that Jacob had. What's going to become of me? Well, God tells him, your future is secure. You're going to come back to this land and you will inherit it and you will have children and they will have children. They'll spread out. They'll be more numerous than the dust of the earth, and all people on earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. You have a future and you have a calling. But then God speaks to that second question, the more important one. Does anyone care? And he says, I will be with you and I will watch over you. And I will not leave you or abandon you until I have brought about that which I have promised. In other words, you are not alone. You matter to me. And when Jacob wakes up, first words out of his mouth, he says, surely God was in this place, and I didn't even know it. Now, to grasp how crucial those words are, up until now, Jacob has not been a religious man. He's never spoken the word Yahweh. If anything, God has been just a punchline. The only time he's ever used the name of God was when he was deceiving his dad. When he went in to present the stew to his father, it's something like, the Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf. Like, my, how hairy your arms are. Like, the scene plays out like that. And the dad at one point asks, how did you get this stew so fast? And the only answer Jacob has is, well, the Lord blessed me. The Lord led me directly to the kill. You see, the name of God is used in a lie. It's something that for Jacob up until this point it's just a name, it's just a concept, it's an abstraction that you can manipulate and use for your own ends and purposes. But at this moment, sleeping on that rock, he realizes that's not who God is. God is a reality to be reckoned with. God is a person with whom you can have a relationship. It's someone to whom you can entrust your life and your future. And the thing is, God doesn't really clarify Jacob's future for him. Think about it. Not much is different when Jacob wakes up in the morning. He still doesn't know what kind of reception he's going to get from his uncle. He doesn't know that when he gets there, he's going to meet the love of his life. He doesn't know that his uncle is going to trick him into working 14 years to earn her hand in marriage. He doesn't know that the love of his life he's going to lose to an early death in childbirth. He doesn't know he's going to have 12 sons. He doesn't know he's going to become rich. He doesn't know that someday he's going to come back to his home and his brother, instead of killing him, is going to forgive and embrace him. He doesn't know any of that. What does God's dream clarify for Jacob? It clarifies God's promise and God's presence. And that's all Jacob needs. Because from that point forward, he rededicates himself. He steps into a new identity. He says, for whatever happens from this time forward, if God will do these things for me, then he will be my God, and I will be his son, and I'll give 1/10 of everything I receive back to him. And to mark this moment, this new identity that he's received, this reality of God that he's come to realize, this commitment he's making, he takes the stone and he sets it up as an altar. And he pours oil on top of it to consecrate it and mark it forever in his memory. Now, the stone that Jacob set up in that moment is so different from the stones that the Romans set up to mark their roads. If you go back to the beginning, I said mile markers help us answer 2 questions. What were those questions? Where am I? And how far until I get to wherever I'm going? They track progress in life. And the thing is, when you pass a mile marker, you don't go back and visit it and go, oh, what a special moment it was. No, you're focused on whatever the next mile marker is ahead. But a milestone is fundamentally different. It helps us answer a different set of questions. Instead of where am I, a milestone helps us answer the question, who am I? And it's not about how far until I get to the next thing, but a milestone is about what is my life going to be about? What direction am I even going in? And a mile marker, we fly by and we never look back, but a milestone, we come back to again, again, and again, and again in life to remind us of who we are. And so it was in Jacob's life. If you fast forward 11 chapters in the book of Genesis, cover all that ground that I just covered, including the wrestling with God after he's made his fame, has built his family and his fortune, come back and been reconciled with his brother. After all that history, 3 decades worth at least, what does Jacob do? He goes back out into the desert. He wants to find that stone. He wants to remember that moment. And when he finds it, he rededicates himself all over again to God. And God reaffirms again for him that this is your identity. You are no longer Jacob, grasper of heels, and you are no longer a deceiver or a trickster, but you are Israel, one who strives with God, the father of a nation through whom all people on earth will be blessed. So here's the point for us. Is all lives have mile markers, right? I mean, all lives progress from one stage to the next. And I'm sure you can look back through your life and you can kind of mark those moments where you kind of move from one stage of life to another. We all have mile markers. But a life well lived also has milestones. Points of contact that anchor us in to our identity. Moments when we come to realize who we are and what we are called to do with our lives. And as we kind of zoom along life's highway, the question for us is, which one are we on the lookout for? Are we always focused on the next mile marker? Are we always jumping ahead to the next goal, the next progression, the next stage in our journey? Or are we still anchored looking back to those milestones that tell us who we are? Because the truth of the matter is that sometimes we can go far and achieve much, but all we end up doing is going further and further and further in the wrong direction. Yes, we need mile markers, but even more, we need milestones. Moments in our faith where we hear God calling our names and naming our future. And so this morning with confirmation, I told all those kids, I said, it's easy for this to look just like a mile marker. You're just something you breeze by on your way to graduation, whatever's next. But I encouraged them, I said, I hope this is more of a milestone. I hope this is a moment where you can kind of set up in your memory and your history, consecrate and know that this is a moment where the God of my parents became my God, someone I could trust with my life and with my future. But I would ask each of you, what are those moments in your life? Because they don't always happen in a sanctuary, right? I mean, there are moments in sanctuaries where we kind of make that faith pledge and that commitment, but sometimes it happens when we're, out in the desert somewhere, wondering what's going to happen to us. There may be some of you today who feel a little bit like Jacob did out in the wilderness, wondering, who am I? What's going to become of me, and does anyone care? And the thing is, I think sometimes in those moments, those are the most honest moments of prayer we have, because sometimes it's when we are most lost, that's when we're the closest to getting found. So what are the moments in your journey where your faith became real, where God awakened you both to his presence and to his promise? And if you can locate those moments in your mind and your memory, my encouragement to you today is to mark them. Set up a stone in your memory. Consecrate them with thanksgiving. And then tell the story to others. Because the dream that Jacob received, it wasn't just for him. It was for his children and his children's children. It was a story and a faith that was given to all of those who would come later, including us. And the same is true of your journey. Whatever those moments were where faith became real, where God's presence was made clear, it's not just for you. It's sort of those moments to be shared, for them to be passed from generation to generation, so that we might remember that we serve a good God. A God who is present with us and among us, not just in moments of high celebration and community, but even in those moments when we are alone, when we feel lost, when we feel forgotten. In those moments, God still comes to us. And he reminds us that we are not alone. We are not abandoned. And we can trust in his provision and journey in his grace so that we, like Jacob, may be able to affirm at all times and all places, surely God is in this place, and I didn't even know it. Amen.